Well, welcome to Fuzzybutts and Friends. As much as Luke hates it, I'm the host of this show, Ginger Morgan, and I am your little dog. And I'm back this week with Luke, continuing the saga of Walk One. So we're going to interview him in a minute. But before we get to that, I did want to thank Genie's Therapeutics for their hemp signature blend for being the sponsor of Fuzzybutts and Friends. So Luke, so your first walk took you from Austin to Boston, correct? You've had many walks since then. So we're on our Austin to Boston. And I wonder, I've had a lot of questions about why people wanted to know why you started in Austin.
Okay, well, that wasn't as smooth as the intro I typically do. You need to work on that when you're interviewing me. Okay, and you just jump right in it. So, okay, all right.
I do, just jump right in. We've already covered your origin story.
That's right. This is for everyone listening. This is part two of our 16th anniversary celebration. And we're continuing our discussion. If you listen to episode one of well, that's not episode one of season 3, but our last episode on the 16th anniversary of Puppy Up, we covered everything, I think, Ginger, up until when the actual walk started, and that was over an hour. So we're back again, everybody, and we're starting off. Okay, Ginger, you just jump right into it. So, okay.
Yeah, that's why I just jumped right in. I figured everybody else had listened before, and here we go.
Yeah, you and I clearly have different styles.
Yeah, we do. I'm in the get her done, and you're in the get along.
All right. So what was the question?
What was the question? Were you not listening? So I've had questions over the years is why did you start in Austin since you were kind of from the San Antonio area?
Well, I was just in San Antonio training for the walk and living there temporarily, but I've spent many years in Austin. Austin really is my stomping grounds. I love Austin, will always be in the top 3 of my favorite cities in the world that I've been to. And when I originally visioned the walk, right? And I realized that I had Hudson and Murphy with me, right? So I had 2 dogs, and I had driven the distance between. I was living in Boston when Malcolm's cancer had spread, and then I came back to Texas to be with my family, and I'd driven that drive from Austin to Boston so many times that I knew it was 2,000 miles, like on the nose, like right at 2,000 miles. And so when I was thinking about a walk from Austin to Boston, I had 2 dogs, just everything came together, 2 dogs, 2,000 miles. So if I did it from San Antonio, it would have been 2 dogs, 2,071 miles, I think is the distance between those cities. So, it just sounded better. 2 dogs, 2,000 miles. A walk from Austin to Boston. It's, it rhymes. It's literary. Everything came together, and Austin really is my favorite place, and one of my favorite places in the world. And it's such a dog-loving, animal-loving community there that I felt like we get better reception and involvement in Austin. And so that's the magic. That's the key behind the sausage.
It worked better with 2 dogs, 2,000 miles, and it did. It had a really great, and still does have a really great ring to it. So on the day that you all launched, did Hudson and Murphy have any idea that it was not just another day in the park with a bunch of people?
No, they had absolutely no idea. But, with them, ignorance was bliss. They just thought we were going on a walk, albeit they both had, no, I'm sorry, correct myself. Murphy had a backpack on. Hudson was still 1 at the time. He would turn 2 actually in Memphis. And so he couldn't wear any pack weight. So, and then Poppy, me, I had a gigantic Osprey backpack that was vastly overloaded. We'll get to that in a minute. So no, well, we had a celebration. So we actually did an event because the night of it.
Yeah, I was getting to that, but go ahead.
Okay.
No, go ahead. So you had like kind of a launch party. So go ahead and get into that.
Yeah, it wasn't really much of a party because I was so focused. I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. I was just trying to go through all the procedures, everything that I had to go through mentally for what I thought would be maybe about a 10-month walk or a year walk, which ended up being times two and a half, 2.5.
Yeah, you started in what, March 16th of 2008 and finished on June 19th, 2010,
That's right.
2010.
So 2 years and a couple of months. That's right.
Yeah.
And so, but something I want to get to though, Ginger, is I hate to use that word because it's used so inaccurately, but as opposed to figuratively, I was scared, I was terrified, and the stress was almost immeasurable because I had to do everything so quickly because I needed my vehicle. I had a Pathfinder SUV at the time. So I had to pack up everything in my apartment in Olmos Park, San Antonio, put it in a storage, minus only the things that we were going to take on the walk, right? That's all I had to have. And then I had to sell my Pathfinder, and then I used that money, some of that money, they used that money for to have a little bit of pocket money, a little bit of cash, because I didn't have a lot of money starting out. I can't recall how much cash I had in my pocket, a couple $100. I have it written down, notated somewhere. But man, it was put everything in storage, sell the SUV. We got a ride from my roommate that we were staying with in San Antonio. She took us up to Austin. Then we stayed the night at a hotel, had a brief, it wasn't a party, just I think it was maybe a couple of people there to celebrate the momentous occasion. There was a bottle of champagne, and I'm like, yep, I'll have maybe half a glass, but that's about it because you realize you're about to take the first step and after that you have pretty much zero access to resources. Theoretically, of course, I had people. I've lived in, obviously, was born and grew up in Texas, so I had my parents. Just north of that, I had my brothers. If there was ever an emergency, we had plenty of support people to be able to contact, and we had volunteers in the San Antonio and Austin area. So we were okay if the boys got into trouble. But we got a ride to the park, and I kind of forgot the question. What was the question?
It was, the question started out was, did Hudson and Murphy realize what they were getting into that day? But my other question was going to be, how emotional or what were you feeling when you actually took that very first step that you knew that you were going to have 1,999 possible more miles to go? I mean, just minus one step at that point. But
well, I think Hudson and Murphy felt kind of the stress. They're very empathic, and I think they felt sort of my stress. But we went to we had a bunch of people come out and join us at the park, so they just thought it was a party, right? Hey, we're going to the park.
Yeah. So did Jim and Renee from Tripods, were they there that day?
Yes, they were. Yes, I had to think about that. We had, I think you were referring to several months before Jim and Renee were here in Austin, and we had a barbecue at one of the parks, and we had the volunteers and other people. But that was a couple of months before the actual launching of Walk One. I don't. Honestly, I feel bad. I feel horrible. I can't recall who exactly was.
I just remember seeing a photo, but it could have been from the previous event and not
I think that's correct.
Okay.
I don't think they were able to make it for the actual launch. I think I'm correct, but my family was there. My mom and my dad came to Walter E. Long Park, which is where we launched out of. And I was surprised. I don't think I knew that some of my brothers were there. Maybe all of my brothers were there. I'll have to think. And my nieces as well. This wonderful Pyrenees rescue out of Houston. They brought a bunch of Pyrenees. I think we had like an armada of Pyrenees, and you know what Hudson thinks about other Pyrenees, or what he thought about the Pyrenees. Although I really don't. I think he back then. Well, he was one, so I don't think he had any anti, hate my own breed sort of sentiment Hudson was just so silly and so cute. He was like, "Oh, we're going out a little park. We're gonna have fun and
I'm gonna
stuff."
go for a walk.
And then he realized, well, we're not going to stop walking for a very long period of time. So it was a wonderful occasion that my family was there, made it even more special. But it wasn't that long. I just gave a brief talk, thanked everybody for coming, and I just want to get on the road because I think we didn't actually start walking until 1 p.m. And
Oh,
even in March in Texas, sometimes you can have hot days. So um, there's a lot. Launch day, what happened between launch and the next week or so, a lot happened. So where do you want me to? I know I typically talk and talk. So where do you
yeah, you
stop
you
there?
have it. You can talk forever. So what I wanted to get to are just some of the stories and some of the people that you met along the way. Is there something in that first couple of weeks, or if you something that comes to mind about somebody that you met on your way in Texas?
Well, yeah, a lot of that, but I do want to get back to something about the walk day because to me this is important. I'm back in Texas now with my family, and it's important because we're on the eve of the 16th anniversary of Walk One, and I've been on the road for 16 years, and don't know I haven't really spent much time with my family at all. And my mom was there, and she had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's about a year or so. The previous year she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she was already in mental decline. And I think, Ginger, the memory I have permanently etched into my memory is as we were saying, as Hudson and Murphy and I were saying goodbye to my family and to all the friends that came out to join us. My mom was just crying. Tears were streaming down her face. She didn't really fully understand. I think she kind of understood what we were doing, but I don't think she understood why. And for me, this is also important. That was really the last time my mom had any lucidity at all. The next time I would see her, she was pretty much mentally gone. So it was such a beautiful, powerful day, but painful as well. So I carried that in my heart. But so as we left. So let me just kind of let me finish off the first week. So the first couple of days at least. So as we were walking, actually, as I put the backpack on me and strapped it to me, I realized, oh God, I think I have too much weight. I'm not 100% because at the last minute I was just cramming stuff in my pack. I wasn't testing it. Oh, we need this. Oh, we need that. Like an emergency. Oh, I need
Yeah.
gauze tape. Oh, of course I had that, but I can't recall what the little things. And I made the mistake of actually putting my laptop in, and I don't know why, but it was the
Gosh.
most insane thing for me to do was to put my laptop in there. And I think I took that out and I had to take out a couple because once I put the pack on, I realized I'm not going very far in this. So I had to take a couple of last minute things out. Then we got on the road. Fox News came out as we were walking away. They were supposed to be out earlier. And so we just did a really brief interview at the local Austin station. And then we set off. And it was a gorgeous day. It was sunny. It was cool. But I knew that the forecasted weather we were anticipating spring storms. So I wanted to make it as far as we could, but I was also mindful of the impending storms. And I got to tell you, Ginger, we didn't make it very far. We only made it a couple of miles before we stopped on the side of the road, and I realized because you have to realize I think it was after 1 p.m. around 1 p.m. when we actually began walking. So we'd already burned through a substantial amount of the day, and plus I was physically and mentally exhausted. I had so much last minute preparation, and then the event itself, and saying goodbye to everything, and then my mom crying there as we walked away. I realized I was tired.
You were done. You were done before you started on that day.
Right. So it wasn't a heroic beginning. So you know how you watch in movies where the hero always starts off and he's got the energy and the pep in his step. It was like the total opposite of that. I was like, holy God Almighty, what did I do? I'm terrified. My heart's busted up because I'm leaving my mother at the time. perhaps when you think maybe she would need me the most. And so I was just fatigued, extremely fatigued. And so we only made it a couple of miles, and I just made the command decision to pitch a tent on the side of the road, on a little highway leading out of Walter E. Long Park. And because we were on the news, we had a ton of people that drove by and waved and said hello, and a person offered us a place to stay. So anyway, we pitched tent for the night, and then we got up the next morning and began the walk. And still, I realized that I was carrying way too much weight. It was crippling me, and I wasn't walking. Just wasn't moving fast enough for us to gain any speed. But I have this. I think we spoke last time, Ginger, is the approach I took to the walk. Most people don't understand this because a lot of people were concerned it's too risky. You're taking on too many risks. I had a very risk averse approach to the walk. And so I took way too much more. I just took way too much more stuff than we actually needed. So the next day, I had to call one of our volunteer people to come out and grab some of my gear, grab some of the stuff that I just can't do it. It's too much weight. And so I think like with the first couple of days, we didn't make it, what, 12 miles.
Oh, you were literally weighted down.
I was weighted down, but then, and this is another thing and then we were going so slow, the storms came in, blew in faster than what was anticipated and what was forecasted. And I had one of those weather radios. Do you know what those weather
Yeah.
radios?
Oh my gosh, those are heavy, aren't they?
They're heavy, absolutely right. They're absolutely heavy. And then more importantly, they have that automated electronic voice, warning, storm, impending storm coming,
Oh no.
hail. It was the works, and what I called the works, the Texas works. It was, as we were trying to make as much progress, I think it was maybe probably day two, I think, or day three. The weather radio just the alarms go off, and it says everything: hail, flash flooding, tornadoes, gusting wind, everything. We were just going to get the Texas works on us. So I made the command decision to just hole up on the same highway that we were still on leaving Austin, and we were just going to
Were you out of the park yet?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't think you can actually stay overnight in public parks. That's pretty much universally not permitted in America. So, or at least I found that's universally true. Public day parks, you can't camp overnight. So we were on the side of the highway, and interesting enough, we pitched a tent in front of some farmland, and there's a funny story here that I'm getting to. And so we were waiting for the storm, which we didn't really, it hit us, but it wasn't it wasn't as bad as we anticipated. The first night, this is important, is the first night it hit us in the tent there on the side of the highway. It came hard. It came hard and then blew through. And, I think I mentioned before, I backpacked before, but I was never like, Bear Grylls or, what is the person that had I can't remember, Les Stroud, who had Survivor Man. I watched every episode of those that I could. And I didn't have a good tent. That was the other thing. As you knew, because we would ultimately buy, or one of our wonderful volunteers would donate a much better tent. Had this little bitty Walmart tent, crappy little dome Walmart tent, and it wasn't rated for really anything. And the storm, I remember the first day, that night when the storm blew in, the winds were so fierce, it was just the sides of this little bitty crappy Walmart tent were just caving in, and Hudson was going nuts. Everybody was afraid. I was stressed. I was fatigued, emotionally drained. It was a lot, but I remember, Ginger, one thing. I think this is important. It was really one of our first nights, and we were sort of being tested and challenged. And I realized that I had so many raw emotions inside of me. And as the storm blew in and was punishing our little Walmart tent, Hudson was very stressed. He was very nervous. As you know, he got nervous.
Yes.
He was a nervous, sweet little
He
boy.
did not like storms. Now I know why.
He did not like storms, but here's the thing, though. I realized he was playing off of my emotions, and I was making the situation worse. So what I did was and precisely, literally, the walls of the tent were being pressed in so that me and my two Great Pyrenees were just sort of kind of cuddled and snuggled in together in this little dome tent. And I realized I was stressed, he was stressed. So I leaned back and just kind of let the wind blow. And I got Hudson in one arm and Murphy in one arm. And I just relaxed and began stroking them and calming them down with my voice. And so we weathered out the first storm. They relaxed, and we got through it. And it wasn't as bad as we anticipated. There was no flash flooding or tornadoes. Thank you. Or tomatoes, as Hudson used to
Yeah,
say.
the tomatoes are coming. Well, I just knew you were going to say that you stretched out and got Hudson, and the two of you hugged up with Murphy for support.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'm
You
not
got
sure if I
you
mentioned.
got your calmness and your support from Murphy, not that they got it from you. I thought that's what you were going to say.
I'm quite certain in our last interview, your interview of me, I think in the last one I mentioned that Hudson always looked to Murphy.
Yes.
Murphy was Hudson's rock, and so he did. But Murphy looked to me, so I calmed Murphy down. Although Murphy was pretty stoic, as you know, he was a tough guy. He was a wonderful, wonderful boy, and he was strong and strong for Hudson. So, but we were. I think at Ginger, I began to realize we really were a pack. We weren't a very competent pack, and we had a lot to work out. And I figured it would. But I think that was the first critical night that I realized that we would get through it together. If we could just work together as a team, we would get through it together. But I have to tell you one more funny story that just made week one just crazy, just insane. And so the next day we were I decided not to start the next day because the storm hit and the roads were pretty rough. And so we were still in front of that farmer's property. And so we were waiting out. We were just waiting till the next day. Oh, I had to dry out my gear. Oh, I forgot to tell you another interesting story. So while we were waiting there, Hudson, I was taking them out on the side of the road to pee. Hudson, oh, this scared the hell out of me. Hudson began writhing and like writhing in pain, like as though he was having an epileptic seizure. We were in you have to realize that we were right on the shoulder of a highway. The grass was pretty high. It was difficult to see. So Hudson began writhing and writhing like he was writhing in pain. I'm like, oh my God, Hudson's having a seizure. And so I got him in the tent and I realized he had stepped in a bed of fire ants. And there were
Oh,
ants.
poor
Oh,
Hudsy.
oh my God, Ginger, fire ants all over him. They not all over him, but they had burrowed into his fur and were stinging him. And so I got him out of the tent, and it was just it was just a nightmare scenario. But one of our supporters brought some really good hydrocortisone ointment. Came out to our tent and dropped that off, and so we got him taken care of. But then, as we were preparing to start walking again, I think we'd only make it like 10 miles or so.
And this is day 45. We're
Oh
still
my
almost done.
gosh. Just rethinking it now, going through it all. Wow, what a nightmare scenario it was. But just to make it even crazier, this farmer we were on the public easement, so we weren't on his property, right? We were on the shoulder of the highway. Well, all of a sudden they hear a truck drive up, and some people had stopped by and said, "Hey, I saw you on TV." But this truck came out, drove up sort of off to the shoulder, put up off the shoulder, and I popped out of the tent, and it was the farmers whose land we were in front of. And he didn't even say, "Hi, how are you? How are you doing? Can I bring you anything?" He just said, "I saw you on TV, and what you're doing is animal abuse, and I'm going to report you to PETA, and I'm gonna call the sheriff at the next town to arrest you before you get there." It was insane. So there was I called him the mad cow farmer. And if you look at the blog, either I or Eric I think I did it. Eric had not come into the picture yet. I think maybe so. I think maybe he had,
He
but
was there. He came into the picture in March of that year. So it may have been a few days before, after this. I'm not sure.
I think so because yes, I think you're right because we made it a couple of towns further, and Eric and I were talking, and he said, "Why don't I just take over the blog? Why don't we just talk and you share the pictures with me?" And I think we had to send them. That was back in 2008, so I don't know if we had to send them via AOL mail or something. I didn't have it. We didn't have a phone, so it's important for the people listening to this. This is 16 years ago, so there were no iPhones then, and I couldn't afford a really advanced, high-powered phone. So the Kim Commando show, I called in there, and she gave me this GPS phone that ended up being basically a 5-pound piece of crap. It there were no GPS functions, and I think we had some maybe Cricket. No, it wasn't. I don't think Cricket existed back then, but some really crappy cell phone service
I
provider.
think it was T-Mobile or something. I can't
It may
remember.
that may be right or something. So we really anyway, so we got through that, and so we finally got back on the road. We made it to the next town, and the sheriff was not there to arrest us. And so it took us really a week, I think, to sort of get things figured out. And this is important. We had been challenged, I think, in just about every way. Crazy people. There was somebody that drove by that offered us the place to take us to spend the night with him overnight. Murphy growled at him and was clearly did not want to be around him. So I at that point, I had not really thought it through. I realized that Murphy was going to be my barometer as to who I trusted, who we trusted on the road. So I politely thanked the man and said, "No, we're fine. We're here." So I think for the first week or so, let's call it 2 weeks, we were trying to figure out how to work together as a team, and we had trained for it. But it's an entirely different thing when you're down in it. You don't have there's no backup. I mean, we did have backup, but there's no phone a friend, right? You're out there,
Right. Yeah.
you're in it, and all of the emotions and stress. It was taxing. But I read a book by Colin Fletcher who wrote. He was like me. He didn't start backpacking or doing extreme stuff until his 30s, and he also got a vision. I want to do this and backpack, and he did some really extreme stuff. But he wrote a book called The Complete Backpacking Guide or Backpacker's Guide, and he said something interesting, Ginger. He said when you embark on a crazy adventure around day 14, it's gonna hit you. It's gonna hit you like a ton of bricks. And Ginger, on day 14, it did. It did. And I remember being in the tent at night, sleeping on the side of the road. We hadn't stayed with anybody. We were on the road entirely by ourselves, every single night. And day 14, I was so tired, so beat up, and all the stress and everything that had been thrown at us the first couple of weeks. I was in the tent. I couldn't go to sleep. I was hurting, and I was thinking. I just said I don't think we're going to make it. I doubted for the first time. I was so hardcore confident that we were going to make it, and just trying to solve every little problem that popped up. I really didn't have a lot of time to think about it. Then at night, you're tired. You just want to sleep and rest your body so you can wake up and do it again the next day. But on day 14, I was sitting in my tent and I questioned it for the first time, and I felt doubt because you think you have all this adrenaline in you. As you know, you were a
Yeah.
marathon. You know what
Yeah.
adrenaline does to the body. It gives you a false sense of confidence, right? So you have to be very careful with adrenaline. And so all that adrenaline had drained out of me. I had zero left. And I realized, holy God, it took us like 2 weeks to get maybe 20 miles or so, or 30 miles. I realized, oh my God, we have, 1,990 or 1,950 more miles or 60 miles to go. And because there's a kind of a false sense of confidence because when you start on it, you start to think about you have to avoid the temptation of thinking about what it's going to be like when you get there, right? Oh, it's going to be great. I will have accomplished this.
Yeah.
You can't do that. That's self-defeating. And the people that I've talked to in the past that have done things like this, um, they saw the glory and not the grind, and they ended up failing. So I really avoided that temptation. But I realized we're going to be doing this every day for the next year, and it ended up being for the next 2+ years. And we had made 40 miles. We still had 1,960 to go, and it hit me. it hit me. And I thought of Malcolm. And as I was stressed, I just leaned back in the tent and I thought of Malcolm. And I thought about the last days of Malcolm before I lost him to cancer. And I realized, man, he was a fighter. You thought Murphy was tough. Malcolm was tougher. And Murphy learned from Malcolm. Okay. So Malcolm taught Murphy to be tough. Unfortunately, Hudson didn't learn from anybody.
I was just going to say, nobody taught Hudson to be tough.
God bless Hudson. He never learned how to be. I always, what's interesting, after I lost Malcolm and then I got Hudson, Murphy filled out. He grew bigger. He put on weight. It was not for me feeding him. And I always wondered from an evolutionary sense whether he really became the big brother and he actually gained girth, gained size. So I just thought of Malcolm and I thought Malcolm, when he got congestive heart failure secondary to his lung cancer that had spread from his osteosarc, he never gave up, man. He just never gave up. And I just remember thinking to myself, Malcolm never gave up, and I'm not going to give up either. I can't give up. I'm not going to give up. And go ahead, please.
This reminds me of how you described the term puppy up. So is this where you came up with puppy up at this time, or did you came up with puppy up before that?
I came up with puppy up before that.
Okay.
Yeah, because in Texas, everyone says cowboy up or man up, and it just. But I realized through training that we would have to through training. Before the walk, I anticipated all this. I knew it was going to be hell. I did. I didn't have any delusional notions that so many people have that it's going to be a walk in the park. I knew it was going to be tough. I knew it would test every ounce of tenacity, determination, courage, love, passion, hate, all the emotions. It does. It tests everything. It takes everything you have as a human being to do something like this. And so I'd already come up with puppy up, but that remind me, if I'm not going to get to it now, but remind me that how funny and ironic that phrase pup. I hated puppy up during the walk because my team, I think before you, my team, every time we'd have a hardship, my team would tell me to puppy up, and I'd say, "Don't say that to me. I came up with it. I know I have to puppy up." So I wasn't thinking about puppy up. I just I knew we would have to do that. I didn't know, and then also I knew I didn't want. To me, Ginger, I knew if something to happen to my boys, it would crush me because I knew I did it to them, right? Because Murphy and Hudson didn't choose to walk 2,300 miles cross country. That was my decision. I put them in that situation, and I was just racked with fear. But I got a quiet sense of confidence and peace within me as I thought about Malcolm in his final days, and I just knew that I couldn't do it and that we would make it. I knew it. I felt it, Ginger. I felt that we would make it. We would make it alive, and we would make it, and we did. That was the 14 days to 2 week mark, the 2 week mark, and then after that, it was just walking and learning, walking and learning.
After that, it was just a walk in the park, right?
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Because then, right after, oh no, it may. I think it actually. It's so hard for me to go back to the sequence of events without reviewing notes that are in storage in the archives of.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm confident within 2 weeks, within the 2 week period, we got attacked by a pack of, or almost attacked by a pack of dogs, and so that was something that I hadn't experienced before, and we got through that, and I just knew it was never going to be a walk in the park. Every turn, every time every time you see a hill and you cross over the hill and you think, oh, I made it over the hill, there's going to be a catastrophe or a challenge down there. But given my nature, Ginger, I like that. I'm challenge and solution oriented, and so I began to love not knowing what was around the bend or not knowing what was over the hill, right? There was always a challenge, but I felt complete and total confidence that Hudson and Murphy and I would get through it. And as you know, we did, or I wouldn't be here to tell the story.
Correct. Yes, you did make it through it. So so you've gotten us through the first 14 days. After that, do you have a story that stands out, like particular with a group of people or somebody that you met along the way that was helpful?
Well, yeah. Well, I think we're going to focus on Texas first. So I have some pictures to share here.
Okay.
There are lots of stories I would say between Austin and College Station ish. there were a lot. Well, there were lots of stories. We met lots of people, um, and uh, interesting
Have
enough.
you?
Interesting enough. I was trying to think about what I wanted to say to tell the story now until you see the picture. I didn't have money for good boots, so I had bought some
Oh
steel.
yes, yeah. Show
I
the
had bought some
picture.
steel-toed boots from Walmart to train in to help build my calves. And I didn't have enough money to buy, as you know, good hiking boots cost a couple $100, and I just couldn't justify the expense. So I thought, okay, I'll just wear these steel-toed boots. So we were outside of College Station, and another one of those crazy Texas perfect storms was looming, and we actually had and we had met some. I think it was Leander. I'm pretty sure it was Leander. We had met some nice people in Leander, and they said, they were telling us about what was that we were on Highway 59 and they were telling us what to anticipate ahead for the day. And they said, "Oh, this is wonderful park. You should be able to make it, and you can just camp out there overnight." Well, we grinded all day long. I think we did our longest day that day to get to this park, and it was basically like one of the roadside parks off of an interstate. You kind of drive in, and there were a couple of fire pits in there, but as we were walking and the sun was setting, I mean, we couldn't go any further because it would be dark and too dangerous for us to walk. I saw the sign, no overnight camping. So I'm like, well, we're gonna have to.
Oh no.
Yep, we're gonna have to camp here overnight. And fortunately, I got us set up, the tent set up, and then the storm hit us. And so it hit us pretty big. And on that night, a tornado touched down about a mile away. The weather that weather radio, I could still recall that computer voice. It's like that, like that Apple computer voice.
Yeah.
Warning, warning, tornado imminent, tornado touchdown. I'm sitting here because my GPS didn't work. I'm like, where is it hitting? Is it going to hit us? But we made it through the storm, but everything was soaked the next morning. And so we woke up and I got all the gear out, the tent, drying everything so we could get back on the road. And a Texas DPS highway patrolman pulled into the park, and somebody had called that morning and said that or the night before, and said there's a suspicious character in the park, and or somebody in the park doing suspicious things. And the highway patrolman got out of his car and was walking towards me and asked me for some ID. And so I was reaching into my cargo pants to pull out my ID, and the guy put his hand on the gun. It's like, hold on there, hold on there. And I'm like, "Well, I'm just getting my driver's license." So I almost got shot. Not really, but it was a
Yeah.
tense moment. And I showed him my ID. He said, "Well, what are you boys doing here?" Something like that. That's a horrible
Yeah.
Texas accent, but it's close enough. And because he was truly a stereotypical highway patrolman. He had the aviator shades on. And I told him what we're doing. I said, "Sir, we're walking from Austin to Boston because I lost a dog to cancer." And he said, "There's absolutely no way in hell you're walking to Boston in those shoes." And I'm like, "In those steel-toe boots." And I just said, "And yet I am. And yet I am." But he was very nice, as would all of the law enforcement, the many, many, many law enforcement officers that we met along our travels. But here's the next important thing. As you know, we had booties because I think we're probably into April now. So it's really starting to warm up in Texas. It's
Yeah.
getting hot. And so I was always worried about the health of their pads. Because as you know, wearing booties for an extended period can also, in of itself, cause some wear and tear on their pads, right? So I was constantly checking their toes, Hudson's toes. That's probably why he never liked people touching his toes.
Yeah.
Because
Probably why.
I had to handle them nonstop. But I was noticing that Murphy was not limping, but not a limp, but I just was concerned he wasn't. I didn't know if he was having pad issues or there was something else. And it was becoming more noticeable. And so I'm going to bring up the first picture now. I hope I do this correctly. Right here. And yep. And so I can't recall the name of the town. I think it was Madison. I think it was Madison, Texas. just outside of College Station, that one of the people that we were staying with or was there that was helping us, took us to the vet clinic to get Hudson and Murphy checked out. So that's what this photograph is. There are my steel-toed Walmart boots
Oh my
that
gosh.
weighed like 10 pounds of boot. There's pardon me. There's my memorial shirt, the first
Yeah.
memorial shirt that
Yep.
I.
I was going to ask you about that. That was one of my questions.
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm doing most of the
Oh,
talking, but
no, I was just going to ask you now, where did the names for this first shirt come from?
yeah, well,
And what was the meaning of the shirt? Why did you want to have this shirt?
sure, sure. Well, I was walking from Malcolm, and I met so many people before the walk began who had lost dogs to cancer, and I just felt like I want to walk. I want them to know that I'm walking. I'm not walking for Malcolm, and this is important, Ginger. Pardon me again. This is important because so many people thought I was walking for cancer in Great Pyrenees or bone cancer alone. And I had to just keep telling people that I'm walking for cancer in dogs. And I'm quite certain I said companion. And don't think I used the term companion animals back then. But we're just trying to figure out what's causing cancer in dogs and other animals, why it's a cross species problem. And so I came up with the idea of having people donate for the memorial shirt, and that gave me a little bit more money to buy gear, buy supplies, and buy food for us. Although we had Honest Kitchen was what was our one of our first sponsors, and they provided really just they provided food for Hudson and Murphy the entire trip. So I want to shout out to Honest Kitchen. They were wonderful but it was wonderful to have them because if we didn't have a dog food sponsor, I didn't. I don't know what I would have done. So, I can't recall how many actual dogs we had on our first memorial shirt, the one I'm wearing right there, but it's probably 30 or 40 or so, and it's just people that knew about what we were doing and wanted to have their dog that they lost to cancer walking with us, and that's important because I always felt like Ginger, whenever we got in a hard spot, whenever we got into a tough situation, I always felt like that we found a way through because we really had angels, all of the angels sort of walking with us. And some people call their dogs when they lose their dogs, they call them Angel Malcolm or Angel this. I've never done that, but I understood it. And I just felt like we had the spirits of all of those dogs walking with us, and Malcolm too. So to me, it was a reminder that this was a bigger story than just Malcolm. And as you
Yeah.
know, that memorial shirt would grow. The number of dogs on that would grow substantially to
Yes.
where I think we had to have like 4-point font or something to fit all the names at the end of the walk.
Yeah, I want to say that the last one that we did had well over 300 names on it.
Yeah, it was a lot.
That the last one we did for walk one had over 300 names on it.
Yeah, so this picture, look how beautiful Hudson and Murphy look. Hudson was such a sweet little boy. And I don't know why he has his backpack on. I think it's I do know. I do know. Okay, so I misspoke myself, and this is important. He had his backpack on, but there was zero weight in it because I knew we would need his backpack at some point when he turned 2 years old. So he did
Okay.
carry a backpack, but there's zero weight in it, no weight at all. So just to correct myself. But this is the first vet visit where we're trying to figure out what's going on with Murphy because he would continue to have pad issues or walking issues. We weren't really clear what was going on with him. And as you know, that would ultimately lead to a concern about whether he had bone cancer.
Correct.
So what do you want me to keep going?
Well, I don't want to leave it. Well, anybody that knows the story will then know that Murphy did not have bone cancer at that
Oh,
at that
okay, well,
point.
let
Yeah,
me.
I don't want to just leave it ultimately to worry about that because
Yeah,
there are so many people that could be listening to this now, 16 years later, that don't know the complete story.
right, right. Well, I just wanted to make sure you didn't have any questions to ask before I continued. Of course, I'm going to continue the story because we met two people that would become very important to us and throughout the duration of the walk, as you know, and also the
Yeah,
foundation, the Puppy Up Foundation as well. So we got through. I think that pretty sure this is Madison, Texas, north of College Station. We were on our way to Palace. Palestine or Palestine, I can't recall. Every state pronounces that
Yeah, yep,
different. I think it's
differently.
Palestine in Texas. And that was where my uncle Jamie lived. And so that was kind of our first real stop. And so we made it to Palestine. We actually went to see another vet. We everywhere we could, we would get vet checks, Ginger. So I want the audience to know that
Yes.
every chance that we had a volunteer in that area. They would take Hudson and Murphy, give us a ride to the vet, get them checked out, their pads checked out. So this was done very, very responsibly. It sounds, I'm sure people listening to this are thinking, my God, it's just a miracle they made it there alive. It was a rough start, but we got a rhythm. And people that have done long range adventures, extreme adventures, understand exactly what I'm talking about. We had reached our rhythm, but Murphy was still having a bit walking longer distances. We weren't walking as much, and he seemed to have what I was thinking at the time, issues with this pad. So we got to Palestine, stayed with my uncle for a few days, got them checked up, and we were headed to Jackson, which is just due east of Palestine. And during that, we almost got attacked by a loose um, uh, Saint Bernard, and that was when he was, in the past couple of encounters we had with feral dogs or loose dogs, and there had been many by this point. This one, we had rounded a corner, and this Saint Bernard was sitting on the porch of the porch of a house, and we were like 40 feet away from him. So it just came up on us. And before I knew it, the St. Bernard was in full gallop right towards us. And I tried my yelling as loudly as I could and posturing. I don't know if you want to get into that for people who are ever potentially attacked by feral dogs, but Murphy went into action. Hudson jumped in. It was chaos. But the St. Bernard yelped and then ran back. So Murphy was a champion. Nobody was hurt. There was no blood at all. So we were completely unscathed. So I don't know if it was a consequence of that interaction, but we didn't even make it to Jackson, Ginger. And I could tell Murphy was not going to walk any further. I could just tell. He was limping. I can't recall if he was really limping or you could just tell he was struggling. I don't think it was a pronounced limp. I knew he was struggling. Something was wrong with him, and it was time to get him off the road. And so we had a wonderful couple in Jackson that picked us up, and they took us to their vet there. And I think this was when the first specter of bone cancer came into focus for us. I don't think at first we were thinking pad issues, right? Statistically, not going to have bone cancer with my second Pyrenees. So we were just thinking pad issues, what's going on. And but we got to Jackson, went to the little country vet there, and he raised the specter from what he saw on the X-ray. He raised the possibility of bone cancer in his leg, and that just changed everything. And because I'd walked through College Station, I did a news interview with the local TV station there, and I said, please go out and interview the wonderful people at Texas A&M. They have veterinary school there, obviously, and I had known them and previously and talked to them previously. And so one of the family we were staying with drove us to another family, and then the other family drove us to Texas A&M to have Murphy checked out. And to kind of shorten that story, thank God, knock on wood. No, I'm sorry. Let me correct myself. Let's see. Yeah, I know I got this completely wrong, Ginger. I'm sorry. I got this completely wrong, inverted. So
Well, it was 16 years ago. So
yes. Okay. Yeah. I'm just trying to think about the sequence of events. So we had him taken to Texas A&M. They couldn't see anything. That's right. They couldn't find anything, and they suspected it was maybe a micro fracture, that the X-ray couldn't detect, and so they recommended just he couldn't walk, and so that my uncle was out of town or left to go out of town or something, and so the people that took us to Texas A&M, they dumped us off at a park, a park just outside of Palestine, Texas, and just dropped us off. And Ginger, we had absolutely no idea what was going to happen next because I mean because we couldn't figure out what was going on with Murphy, and so Texas the wonderful people at Texas A&M said, well, we think it's a microfracture. Well, you can't keep walking on a microfracture because then that microfracture becomes a macrofracture or a break, and so Murphy was sidelined from that moment on, and the ragtag team I had at the time. We put the post out there, I guess, on MySpace. I guess Facebook wasn't even, I'm fairly certain we weren't even on Facebook at the time, although I have to look at the secret.
No, you
Were
were
we?
not on Facebook at the time. That you didn't get on Facebook until
Memphis, maybe? Or
yeah, Memphis, or yeah, when you were here in Memphis, because I had never even heard of it, and neither had you. A friend of ours had, a friend of mine had told us about it and said, "Hey, you need to be on Facebook." And I was like, I don't even know what it is, but now we do.
Okay.
Okay.
So we got dumped off at dumped off. It just they the people that drove us to Texas A&M took us to an actual state park. And it was a wonderful park, wonderful facilities. We had a campfire right by a pond, and we had absolutely no idea what the heck was going to happen next. And so my people at the time, you weren't a part of the picture yet, not until we got to Memphis. And so the team I had at the time put it out on social media, and this wonderful Christian couple. Ginger, do you remember the name of the town outside of Tyler, Texas?
Ben Wheeler.
Ben Wheeler, that's exactly right. Ben Wheeler, what a strange name for a town. Lori and Silas, they contacted my people and said, we'll take him in. We'll take Murphy in because the plan was at the time, somebody needs to take Murphy in and Hudson and I will continue on. And so they agreed to, and they picked us up. They'd never met us before, had no idea what the heck they were getting themselves into. And so Lori and Silas came. I think we stayed 3 nights at that park, not having any idea of what the future of Walk One was going to be like. It could have all just ended there. And I can't recall how many months we were into it, but it was starting to get hot. And so Lori and Silas picked us up, and they were just the most beautiful people, the most gracious, generous, wonderful
Yeah,
people.
they sure were.
Sure are. Unfortunately, I haven't talked to them in a
Yeah.
while. But they took us in. They had 2 Pyrenees themselves, so it was a Pyrenees thing. They had 3 Pyrenees. Gosh, I can't recall the other two. Anyway, they were peer people. So actually, it was a good thing they were peer people, Ginger, because they knew what they were getting into. Because Murphy was an extreme version of a Pyrenees, about the most stubborn
Exactly.
SOB.
Yes. Yes. And I thought in the beginning, I'm fast forwarding here to when I met Murphy, and we can go back. And I got to know his personality, and I got to know you and your personality, and I thought that Murphy was just like imitating you until I did some reading up, and then I thought, well, maybe Luke's getting it from Murph.
No,
But
I'm quite certain Pyrenees became more stubborn first, stubborn before
yeah,
I
probably.
came into the picture of the universe. Yeah, as you know, that they're well known for being stubborn SOBs. Beautifully so, but they're independent. They call it nicely an independent breed, but that means kind of a pain in the arse to deal with. But they had experience, and they took Murphy in, and Murphy absolutely loved Lori and Silas. You can see him right there. He's so happy
Yeah.
with them. And Silas was just a great, patient person. He's just a great, great guy. And so that the plan was after this, Ginger, Murphy was going to stay with them until we figured out what was going on. And to kind of button up the story on this, for some reason, I can't recall the sequence of events. We took him. We were talking to the folks at Texas A&M, and we decided that we felt like because we couldn't find a break, we couldn't find what was going on with them. I made the command decision to do a biopsy and have it looked at Texas A&M. And so we did that at a vet clinic in Ben Wheeler. And there's a wonderful picture of Hudson sitting outside the door with his head on the floor of the vet clinic and his head right outside the door with me and Murphy inside the door, kind of waiting on the news to figure out what happened to the biopsy. Because as you know, once you do a biopsy on a bone, you have to puncture that bone. So whatever.
Right.
So we knew at that moment Murphy was sidelined for months. And but we did the biopsy. The pathology came back negative. Thank God. Murphy didn't have bone cancer, but it didn't matter anyway because, well, it did matter, but it from a logistical standpoint, he couldn't walk. So we knew that he would be sidelined. And as you would find out, as you would come to know, he was sidelined all the way up to Memphis. That's right. He did not
Right. Yeah.
go to Memphis.
Yes.
Probably from May all the way till August, we had to have this whole chain of volunteers and supporters that we would go forward, and then they would drive Murphy to the next family so that Murphy, so whenever we stopped, if we stayed with some people, that Murphy would be together, which was important to me. We had to be together as a pack, and Lori and Silas stayed with us all the way from Ben Wheeler all the way to Texarkana. And then we met a wonderful family in Texarkana that helped us out pretty much all the way to Little Rock. And then we had some people in Little Rock that helped us out to Memphis, to you.
But now, Lori and Silas came to Memphis as well.
They did. They did. Well,
They
as
did.
you know, they stay.
Yeah.
Even now, they're still a part of the story and still part of this whole
Yes.
wonderful story. But
So this might be a good place to stop this episode of Fuzzy Butts and Friends, and this will air on March 16th. So congratulations on the anniversary of 16 years of I'll just cut to the end, cut to the chase of this. We know that you made it to the end, and here you are. So you survived. And we're going to pick up with a couple more stories. Everybody just listen in periodically. We'll obviously have it on Facebook and Insta and all the places about when we're going to have more stories. But hopefully you've enjoyed this episode. And now's the time where I typically will give you a cancer tip of the week. And since we have ended this basically on, I've gone through, in my mind, I've gone through every dog I've ever had. Murphy's limping. Make sure if your dog is limping to get it checked out, and even go as far as Luke did and have a biopsy done if you don't get a conclusive diagnosis of whether it's just a break or it could be something else.
yeah, I'm remembering back now. They're on the X-ray. Texas A&M did a ton of X-rays. On the X-rays, we couldn't discern if there was a starburst pattern, which is what you see in bone cancer in dogs. So there was just a big question. And you're right. If the X-ray is not conclusive, absolutely, and your dog is limping, you got to do the biopsy, because, as you know, when bone cancer is diagnosed in dogs, typically it's already spread to the lungs. So it's very, very important to get early diagnostics on it.
Yep. But I know that's the hill I climb, and I'm going to die on every day, is early detection. So let's do everything that we can to keep them all healthy. And Luke, I'm going to let you end it, since I took the thunder away from the beginning of the episode by being your little dog.
It's just, I have to say, I've obviously done hundreds and hundreds of interviews, but not in this Zoom podcast setting. And it really is weird being on this side of the screen.
Right. Yeah.
You did a great job, Ginger. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule, running the foundation to do this for the 16th anniversary. It was obviously a wonderful story. And so we thought we'd get through Arkansas today, but to Memphis, but there are just so many wonderful stories that it's just a great adventure and wonderful story. So thank you, everybody, for listening to this installment of the 16th anniversary of Puppy Up. And we're going to do more of these. I think, Ginger, we're going to do all the states all the way up into Boston.
Yeah, we are. So they'll come out, and kind of depending on how many stories we get per state. But yeah, we're going to take it all the way to the end of it.
Yep, that's the plan. So we'll get you all the way to Boston. We have lots more stories, lots more photographs, lots more love, and just great love, great, wonderful stories. That was Walk One. So thank you, everybody. Make sure you go check out our YouTube channel, fuzzybuttsstudios.com. Listen to us on your podcast platform, such as iHeartRadio or Spotify. We drop it on Tuesdays. Once or twice, we didn't get it out until Wednesday, Ginger, for a number of reasons, but we do it Tuesdays. Tuesdays, you'll find a new episode of Fuzzy Butts and Friends. Thank you, everyone. Until next time, puppy up. Talk soon.
Bye.